Hi there, it's Jennifer McGuire and welcome to another video. Today is my last video that I'm doing on Perfect Pearl pigment powders. Today is all about using them with water, which really opens the door to many great techniques, which I'll demonstrate. Now, I never really intended to do multiple videos on using these pigment powders, but when I put up my first video, so many people responded saying that they've had them for years, so I thought it'd be good to show more ways to use them. Also, if you don't have perfect pearls, they are super inexpensive, only like $3 for a bottle, and it'll last you for a very long time. So today is all about using the perfect pearls with water. If you missed my other perfect pearl videos, I will link to them at the end of this video, so you can check those out too. In case you didn't see those videos, I'll briefly tell you that perfect pearls are pigment powders. It's a very fine iridescent shine, a powder that you can add to your projects. I've shown many ways to do it, but today is all about mixing these with water to create pearlescent watercolor effects. You can use other pigment powders besides perfect pearls, but the reason I like the perfect pearls is when they come in contact with the water, it stays on your project and you don't have to worry about using a fixative. So this little jar right here is the perfect pearl basic white color, and I use it a lot. So let's start by making a pearlized water mixture. I've used this many times in videos. I needed a fresh new bottle. Mine was empty, so I thought I'd show you how I do that. I use a Holtz Distress Sprayer, and I fill it with water, but you could use any mist or water bottle you have. I then put a generous amount of perfect pearl inside. This is that basic color. And then you shake the living daylights out of it. I actually usually put more powder in than you just saw. I usually put in like a teaspoon and a half, and I've never had my bottle get clogged. I've had this bottle for a few years now, and it's nice to have it always on hand. The pearl will settle on the bottom, but all you have to do is shake it up and it'll be ready to use again. And you can see that pearly shine kind of float around in the bottle. Now that we have this ready, we'll use it for a few different techniques today. I'll also share ideas for using your colored perfect pearls with water too. Let's start with this example, one of my favorite ways to use that pearlized water we just created. I've done this in a video before, I'll link to it in the top right, but it's good to review before we move on to new techniques. This card features a really awesome new stamp set. This is from Colorado Craft Company, and it's called Big Bold Nordic Ornament. One of the things I really like about Colorado Craft Company is their images are large. So they're great to use on larger size cards like 5x7 or Slimline, or just to have a bold effect on a traditional card size. I'll cut this into a giant ornament for a Slimline card. So I have a piece of Holtz watercolor paper in my MISTI stamping tool here, and I'm stamping this image with Versamark ink. I'm using the smooth side of this watercolor paper. Any watercolor paper will work. I like the Holtz watercolor paper because it is bright white, and it's available in pre-cut sizes or 8.5 by 11. I'm adding white embossing powder to it, and I will heat set it. It won't be easy to see the image, but it is there. Now for the magic. I'm taking Holtz Distress Ink and generously adding color over the embossing. This will look like a hot mess for a while, but I promise the result will be pretty in the end. Notice I'm not taking any time to blend these colors. It doesn't matter one bit. You're just putting down a generous amount of different colors. I used Mowed Lawn, Evergreen Bough, Salty Ocean, and Chipped Sapphire. Now I'm taking that pearlized waters that we made before. I shook it up really well, and now I'm spraying it very generously. Then we set it aside. It'll look messy. It'll look terrible. Trust me, it'll be pretty when it dries. So I set that aside to dry. By the way, don't use a heat gun. It looks better if it dries on its own. And when we come back, you can see that it has this beautiful blended color with lots of pearly shine on it. It'll look even better when we die cut it into a circle. Now I'm using a baby wipe to just remove some of the color and pearlescent shine that ended up drying on top of our white embossing. This has a lot of solid area to it, so some of it settled on there. So I just carefully remove that. If you use an outline image, you won't have to do this step because none of the color will dry on top of the embossing. So basically our white embossing resisted the color and the pearly shine, and it just gives this gorgeous, really fast result. This is one of those that you can mass produce. Just line them up, let them dry, and you'll have beautiful shine in the end. Now, after I let this dry and I had put so much water on it, it's pretty warped. Here's my trick that I've done for a long time now to flatten out any of my watercolor pieces that are warped. I just use a laminator. I put the piece into a folded piece of typing paper or printer paper, run it through, and that flattens it beautifully. If your embossing powder loses its shine during that, all you need to do is heat set it again and the shine will come back. Next, I'm using a super large circle die from Pink & Main. They have a set that has a bunch of different sizes and it goes really big. And I'm using that to cut down the pattern that we have here. This stamp works great on a background, even not cut to a circle. It's a beautiful image. You could even cut out the different characters in the image and use them individually on a card. Okay, so I'm going to keep this card very simple by making this a giant ornament. I have a piece of pool cardstock there that is 3 3/4 inches wide. I'm gluing this circle right towards the bottom, and then I will create a note card. I'm taking an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock and folding it in half. So I end up with a giant card here. It's 5.5 by 8.5. But I'm going to trim this down to make my own custom slimline card. So this pool color piece will end up being 8.25 inches tall by 3 3/4 inches. I don't want to try to figure out or measure my card, so I'm just going to glue this onto the corner of the card, right up against the crease there, leaving a little trim, and then I'll cut off the extra. The reason I'm showing you this, and I'll do this in other cards in this video, is a lot of people are really concerned about getting the slimline sizing right, the dimensions. You don't have to. Make your card any size you want that will fit into the envelope. So I will show you the final card dimensions of all my cards today, and they're all different. And I'm going to show you how to make your custom envelope. Okay, back to the card. Now it's time to create our sentiment that'll go across the ornament. This sentiment is from the Colorado Craft Company Big Bold Poinsettia Blessing stamp set that I'll show you a little bit later in this video. I'm stamping this with Altenew Obsidian black ink. This is a fine pigment ink. So I can stamp it and then add clear embossing powder to it, which will give it some shine. I wanted to keep the sentiment small on this card so that the ornament itself has big impact. Also, I didn't want to cover up a lot of the pattern in the ornament because I think it's really beautiful. So after I've heat embossed this, I'll just trim it and I have a nice sentiment strip to go across the ornament. With a long sentiment strip like this, I like to use a T-ruler to make sure it's straight. So I have liquid adhesive on the back of my sentiment, and I can kind of wiggle around until it's straight against the T-ruler. Okay, now for like the string hanging the ornament, I used the dot image that's included in the ornament stamp set. I stamped it once, and then I moved the image down, and I'm putting a piece of scrap cardstock in there to mask it, and I will stamp it again to make the dots longer. I originally was going to leave the dots this color, but I ended up changing my mind, which you'll see later. But I use the dots as a pattern. Okay, so next I have the ornament topper that's included in the stamp set. I will silver heat emboss this onto my card, but I will also silver heat emboss it onto a scrap of white cardstock so that I can cut out the ornament topper itself, not the string, just the little ornament topper, and glue it onto the card for added dimension. This also covers up the fact that I was silver heat embossing along the edge of that circle and it didn't do a good job. So I can just glue this on top and no one will ever know. Okay, so next it's time to add some embellishments. I'm using this Cat Scrappiness funnel tray, which is my new favorite tray for pearls. I know people will ask about this because it funnels back into your container. And I'm using a little pickup tool to add it into drops of Connect liquid adhesive from Gina K Designs. These are Trinity Stamps Something New pearls, which are beautiful iridescent white. Okay, let's look at the completed card. It is 8.5 inches by 4 inches, which isn't a typical slimline card size, but that's okay. It worked for the cardstock I had and the design I did. And it fits into my slimline envelope, which is a little bigger than 4 by 9 inches. Here you can see the beautiful shine on that background. If you tilt it one way in the light, the background looks dark. If you tilt it in another way, it's just like a silver shine. It's such a fast and easy technique to do with background stamps. It's a fun resist, but it worked really well with this particular large ornament. By the way, for the dots, for the string at the top, I ended up covering them up with little silver baubles from Trinity stamps. I thought that was a great way to add more shine. Okay, my next example is another resist technique where I put perfect pearls with water on top. But this time I used colored perfect pearls, and the results are just gorgeous. Now for this card, I used a new Colorado Craft Company stamp set called Big Bold Slimline Nordic Snowflakes. This goes really nicely with the last stamp set I used, but I loved all the different snowflakes here, so I decided to use them all as is to create my background. So instead of using the individual images, I'm just using the whole stamp set as is in my stamping tool. So I'm putting it in the corner of my stamping tool. Then I'll close the door and carefully flip it over. Nothing's holding it there. I just have it right there on my door so that when I close it, it's in the corner. Now I'm using some tape to tape the backing onto the door of my MISTI. So the part that's being taped is the part that has the black printing of what the images are. Once I have this taped down, I can remove the clear piece that's facing up towards the camera, and all of my images are there, ready to stamp. It's such an easy way to create a background out of a stamp set like this. So I have a navy piece of cardstock, and I'm using my anti-static powder tool. I'll ink up all of the snowflakes with Versamark ink, and then I will clear heat emboss them. And by the way, those pieces of tape I used to tape this into my stamping tool, I can reuse again for die cutting. Now we can add perfect pearls and water on top of this, but this time I'm using colored perfect pearls. So I have a turquoise, a forever blue, and a purple. Now I put 3 puddles of water with my spray bottle onto my glass work surface, and into each of the puddles I'm putting a tiny scoop of the perfect pearl. Now this will make a lot of perfect pearl water so that I can continue to make more cards after this. To get things started, I sprayed the whole background just so there was some wet on the paper, and now I'm coming in with the different perfect pearl mixtures that I created off to the side and adding them on top in different areas. So I'm not doing like a blended look, I'm just doing splotches of different colors here and there. You can see how beautiful these bright colors are against the dark background. Now the more concentrated you make your perfect pearl mixture, the more intense the color and shine will be. So use less water if you want it to be more bold, more water if you want it to be a little bit more subtle. So I'm just quickly painting these on here. You can see not taking any effort at all to make it look good. It will look like a hot mess. This is another one of those techniques where you gotta just stick with it. You apply your perfect pearls, then you set it aside and let it dry on its own. When you come back, you'll have this beautiful bold snowflakes that were clear heat embossed that resisted the perfect pearl we put on top. So if you have colors of perfect pearl, this is a great way to use them. Just pick a dark colored cardstock, do clear embossing, and add on top with water. So here you can see the beautiful results that we get after letting it dry. There is bad warping to this, so I'm putting it in between 2 pieces of typing paper and running it through my laminator to smooth it out. This is a huge help for me, because if I try to glue down this warped piece, it won't really be flat right away. So I like to just run it through the laminator to make sure it's nice and flat and will make the card come together better. In this case, the piece was big, so I did 2 pieces of typing paper or printer paper or copy paper, whatever you want to call it, and ran that through. And there you can see how nice and smooth it is. If your clear embossing powder gets dull after doing that, you can just reheat set it and it'll be shiny again. Finishing this card was super easy. I trimmed my background down and added it to a large white note card. Now this is another one where I just made it whatever size worked best, and it ended up being 8 inches by 4 inches. So it'll still fit fine into a slimline envelope. Now for the center, I used the Simon Says Stamp Sophie Snowflake die. I die cut that from Erin Lee Creative holographic cardstock and added it right to the center along with some Trinity Stamps Bubble Bath gems. That gives a nice iridescent look that matches our background nicely. I also have the same sentiment strip that I used on my last card, black heat embossed there in the center. So you can see how when you tilt this in the light, it really changes. It goes from dark with deep colors to a shiny white if you tilt it. Such a neat effect and so easy to do with the perfect pearls. Okay, my next few examples show how you can use perfect pearls and water to paint in your images. And I have a lot of different looks to share with you. This first one shows you how you can add color to basic white perfect pearl and do watercolor. For this, I'm using the new Colorado Craft Company All Weather Friends stamp set. I love this image. This is from the illustrator who's popular with children's books, and her images are fantastic. I love this little guy holding the umbrella, and we'll kind of change the scene a little bit. I also wanted to show you two other new stamp sets from this line. I didn't use them in today's video. I ran out of time, but I really thought they were great and I wanted to show them to you. On the left is the Christmas present set. I like that dog at the top there looking at the presents and the dog bone. And then over on the right is the Wonderful Time stamp set. So again, I won't be using these two, but I will use that last one I just showed you. I will also be using these two stamp sets that I've used in a video before. I'll link to it up here on the top right. They are also from Colorado Craft Company. The one on the left is Better Together, and the one on the right is Christmas Tree Cat. I'll be using the sentiment We're Better Together from the set on the left, and the little mouse image on the bottom of the stamp set on the right. We'll add those in with the new set to create a new scene. I have a piece of watercolor here that is 3 3/4 inches wide by 8.5 inches tall. I wanted to figure out where to position this little image and the raindrop images next to it. So I'm actually using the packaging to help me guide it. So I've positioned the packaging where I want the image to end up on my cardstock. Then I just lay the images on top of the packaging. So you can see how I'm lining them up there. Then once I'm happy with it, I can close the door on my MISTI to pick up the stamps, and then I can remove the packaging. So keep in mind, your packaging is clear. You can use it to help kind of decide where to put an image on your card. Okay, so now I'll stamp this with black pigment ink. Then I will add clear embossing powder. I'm going to make 2 of these at once. I'll probably go back and make more later on. So it's helpful to use the stamping tool, but you could definitely use an acrylic block for all of these techniques. So I put in my clear embossing powder and I heat set it. I like to do watercolor in embossed images just because it makes it easier for me. I am not good at watercolor, so it's helpful in kind of staying inside of the lines. Now I wanted this to be on a slimline card to make a tall scene. I thought that would be fun with the rain. So I'm putting this back into my MISTI stamping tool and adding more raindrops above the umbrella. Then I also added a little mouse under the umbrella so we could have the 2 little critters together, which helps to make that sentiment underneath work well. So I added some raindrops, the little mouse, and then I will clear heat emboss these and do this on both panels. I will repeat that with the raindrops until I fill the top of the card with rain falling down. Now it's time to add some quick pearlescent shiny watercolor. For this, I'm using Distress ink, and I like to press the Distress ink pad right onto my glass media mat. So you'll see me do that to the right. I then will spray it with a little bit of the pearlized water. That way I end up with a pearlized watercolor. You could use other dye inks for this, but I find that the Distress ink works really well. If you want more pearl shine, you can put a little tiny addition of more perfect pearl right into the color. I'm going for softer color here. If you want it to be more intense, you can add more ink. If you want it to be lighter, you add more water. If you want it to be shinier, you add more perfect pearl. So it's nice that you can have control. I like to just use the pearlized water to do this instead of just mixing more perfect pearl and water on my desk. It's a huge time saver to have that bottle ready. So that was picked raspberry I did first. Here I'm using pumice stone for our little critters. Now it's hard to see here, but when it dries, the pearlized or the perfect pearl kind of rises to the top, so you have that shine on top of your color. And that's what makes it really cool when you tilt it in the light. So in one way you have dark color and the other way you have pearlescent shine, which you'll see once this all dries. So I continued this process for the rest of the image. I used the peacock feathers here for another part of the umbrella. And I used the peacock feather and pearlized water with a lot of water for the rain, so that our rain just had a little tint of blue to it. Now I will say I'm not taking any effort here to do shading or make this look realistic. One of the things I like about the style of these particular images is they're very forgiving. You want it to kind of have an artsy feel to it, so it can be pretty basic. Okay, so I finished doing all of the watercolor, let it dry, and then I added it onto a folded pool note card. Now my final card was much shorter than a regular Slimline card. So I wanted to show you how you can take a regular Slimline envelope and alter it to be shorter also. So here's my completed card in a regular Slimline envelope. I'll link to the envelopes I use below. They're a little bit bigger than 4 inches by 9 inches. So I just lay my card towards the top of the envelope and put a little mark about 1/4 inch from the bottom of the card. Now I'll cut at that little mark. So I'm cutting the bottom of my envelope off. Now we just need to reseal that bottom. So I take a little bit of Gina K Connect liquid adhesive, or you could use double-sided tape, and I seal the bottom again. Once that's dry, you can put your card in it and it's the perfect size. So there you can see that it fits in there nicely. The final size of this particular card is 3.5 by 8 inches. So you can see how I made my envelope about 1 inch shorter because my card is about 1 inch shorter. Here you can get a closer look at that pearlized look that we have with our watercolor. If you tilt it one way, the color is darker. If you tilt it another way, it's shiny. So this is a fun way to use your basic white perfect pearl with your inks to do watercolor. Now let's use our colored perfect pearls to do watercolor. And I'll do this on both white and dark cardstock. The colors on dark really is impressive, but I wanted to show you both options. This will give you a lot of shine and very fast to do. For this, I'm using the new Colorado Craft Company Big Bold Poinsettia Blessing stamp set. You can see the sentiment on the left there is the long strip that I used on my first 2 cards. I'll be using the large image and a sentiment from this for my next 2 cards. So I have a piece of dark gray cardstock here, and I'm stamping with black pigment ink and then clear heat embossing the large image. Any dark cardstock would work here. You could even use black if you want. There is black watercolor paper out there, but I know most of us don't have it, so I just decided to demonstrate this on regular cardstock to show that it works. Now remember before when I took colored perfect pearls and mixed it with water on my glass mat? I'm doing the same here. I have Forever Red, which is a nice dark red color, and I will spray some water on my work surface, then put a little scoop of the red pigment powder into it, mix it, and start painting. Now, the more pigment powder you put in there, the more intense the shine will be. The less pigment powder you put into the water, the more subtle it will be. I like to go for a lot of shine, so I put a little extra perfect pearl in there. Those little bottles last forever. I've never had to replace any except that white perfect pearl because I've used it a lot over the last 15 years. But these colors I've had for a long time. Now this is one of those where you could mix colors together and try to blend between 2 colors, but I like to just go down with a solid bit of color. And that's what you see me doing here. Again, no ink was used. It's just the colored perfect pearls and water to fill these in. Now for the leaves, I'm using Sour Apple, which is a pretty bright green, but it's the only one I have, and it really looks neat on the dark gray cardstock. It kind of brightens things up. So I mix that with water over there on the bottom corner of my glass media mat, and I'll paint in the image, and you can see how this really glows. I find the shine gets even more intense as it dries on your cardstock. Now, after your first layer dries, if you want more color or more shine, you can go add another layer. Just go right on top and it'll make it even more intense, as you can see I'm doing here with the red. I think it's best to just sit this aside to let it dry on its own. And when you come back, you'll see that it looks magical again. When you tilt it one way, it's very shiny and bright. When you tilt it another way, it's a little more dark and subtle. It looks really cool on the dark color cardstock. However, I wanted to show you the same technique on white cardstock. Actually, this is white watercolor paper. I gold heat embossed this same image on watercolor paper, and now I'm using the same perfect pearls and water to paint in the image. Now this is another example of where you want it to dry before you judge it. It won't look good at this point. The color will kind of go on splotchy. That's because it's a colored pigment powder in a clear water, right? And so when you put it on white, some of that white might show through. But you can do a second layer of the pigment powder or put more pigment powder into your water, and then you will get more intense results, which you'll see in a moment. Another thing you can do to intensify the color of your colored pigment powder is to add some ink into your mixture, like we did before. Because when you use white pigment powder, like I did on the umbrella card, and you mix it with a colored ink, the shine at the end is still the white. But with this one, the shine will be colored because we're using a colored powder. Now in this case, I'm going to do both. I took 2 different colors of Distress ink. I did Mowed Lawn and some Forest Moss. And I'm adding some Sour Apple to that. And then I'll add the water. So in this case, I colored my water green with ink, and I have a green Perfect Pearl pigment powder. So this will be more intense green as I paint it, and the shine will be green. So don't be afraid to mix your inks in with the water and your colored Perfect Pearls. It's just another way of getting more from the products you have. Okay, so once that dries, you can see the result up there on the top left. Remember I said it would be a little bit splotchy until you add your second layer. So over here on the right, I have more of the Perfect Pearl, and I can go in and paint over the image again. Then the results will be beautiful. So if you're using just colored Perfect Pearl and water, I do recommend 2 layers. But remember, this powder goes a long way, so you're really not using much. While that dries, let's create the frame for our card. I'm starting with a piece of white cardstock that is 8.5 inches long by 3 3/4 inches wide. But you can do whatever size you want. Remember, you can make your cards whatever you want to fit in the envelope. I'll show you how to adjust your envelope again here in a moment. I have 2 rectangle dies from Waffle Flower. These are A7 rectangle dies. I'm taking the bigger of the 2 rectangle dies, and I'm cutting that from the white cardstock. Making sure I have enough room for my sentiment on the bottom. We'll cut the extra off the top in a moment. Okay, so I'll run that through my die cut machine, and I have my first window. Now I wanted to have a mat behind that. So I'm taking the smaller of the 2 rectangle dies and cutting that from a scrap of gold cardstock. Now the rectangle that gets cut out in the center, I can save for another project. I'm just using the frame. So I'll just cut some of this excess off so our frame isn't as big. And this will get glued behind our white frame. So this gold one is actually behind the white. So I'll flip my white over, put adhesive on the back of it, and then add the gold frame behind that. So you'll see I'll end up with a gold mat behind the white. Little steps like this make a big difference in the final card, and it'll match our gold embossing too. I took this frame and laid it over our watercolor piece where I wanted it to be positioned, and now I can cut the excess from the edge. It's not glued there, I'm just holding it so that it's ready to be added to our card when we assemble. So I'm just trimming off the excess. Now I want to create a note card that is slightly bigger than that frame piece we just made. So I'm holding the frame piece close to the corner of a folded piece of white cardstock. So folded, this is 5.5 by 8.5. And I put a pencil mark where I should cut it, along the right and along the bottom. So I'll end up with a note card that's a little bit bigger than our background. So it's not always necessary to measure to make sure you have the right dimensions. Instead, make little marks with your pencil and eyeball it. Then you can always fix it if you need to, but sometimes it's fun to not have to worry about the measurements. So there I have a note card that's slightly bigger than our frame. Next, I put some craft foam on the back of our frame, and I'll add our watercolor piece behind it. Then I can add this onto our folded note card. So put a little more adhesive on the back of the watercolor piece there and add it to our card. So our final card size is not a typical slimline card. It's shorter than one, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. It's what worked best for the design that I came up with. So I have a regular slimline card here that is a little bit bigger than 4x9. I again cut the bottom off so it would be a better fit for my particular card I designed. Put some adhesive in the bottom of it to seal it off, and now I have a custom size envelope for my card. So let's look at the completed card. You can see it fits great into this envelope, and here you can see the card. Now the final dimensions of this card, again, are unusual. It ends up being 4 inches wide and 7.5 inches tall. Sometimes a super long slimline card can be intimidating, so to make it a bit shorter makes it manageable for me. And also it's nice to design a card without having to fit within a certain size. Here you can see how the image looks different depending on how you tilt it in the light, but the shine from the Perfect Pearls are beautiful. Now let's look at the dark version that we did. I completed the card in the same way. However, this time I did a black rectangle mat on the inside instead of gold, and I put it on a dark gray note card. Once again, I made my envelope a bit smaller so it was a better fit, and I thought I'd show you that process again. I have a white slimline envelope that's a bit bigger than 4 by 9. I'll lay my card close to the top of that envelope, and then I'll put a pencil mark about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom of the card on the envelope. So you can see a little mark right there, and that's where I'll cut off the bottom of the envelope. This is an easy trick to do, and it just keeps the envelope from being a little too long on the ends of your cards and kind of getting beat up in the mail. So this way your card fits snug in that envelope, but you could leave it unaltered if you wanted to. Now when I looked at my completed card, I decided I wanted even more color and more shine, so I put another coat of the Perfect Pearls on top. So you can layer up as much as you want. Mine will be pretty intense. If you want a softer look, you could skip one of the layers for sure. Okay, let's look at the completed card. You can see it fits nicely in our custom envelope. And there you can see the gorgeous colored shine. When you tilt it one way, it shines more, and it really catches the light wonderfully. It's like magic in real life. The final card size is about 4 by 7.5, just like our last example too. So I hope that with all of the videos I've done, you see all the things you can do with those Perfect Pearls that have been probably sitting in your drawer. I also know that this works with other pigment powders, but the Perfect Pearl ones stay put when they come in contact with water, so I recommend those. If you're interested in the supplies that I use here, they're linked below in my YouTube description, and you can check here in the middle for other pigment powder videos. The top right for a link to my blog where I'm giving away 12 of these stamp sets to a lucky winner. So be sure to check that too. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I hope everyone is staying safe out there and healthy, and we'll see you soon.